Hello, welcome to the Creative Writing Life podcast. I'm Paul Zeidman, my trusty co-host, Justin Sloan, unfortunately unable to make it today, so you get just me, but I'm still more than happy to talk to our special guest, Jennifer Manocherian. Now, I love this. This is a laundry list of information about previous jobs, I guess. Family therapist, divorce mediator, Broadway and off-Broadway producer. That's got some stories in it, I'm sure. Musical book writer, screenwriter. We'd love to hear that. Producer, screenwriting teacher. I also love to hear that. So, Jennifer, the first thing I have to ask you is, you do sleep, right?
Yeah, I do. I passed out and then I'm restored and then I begin all over.
It seems like you wake up and say, "What am I going to work on today?"
No, I don't have to. I very rarely ask myself that question because I know what I want to work on.
Okay, that makes plenty of sense. So, as regular listeners and viewers of the show know, that we always start out talking about something we've read or watched lately. I'll give you time to think about that. I just finished watching The Holdovers with a
Oh,
fantastic job by Paul Giamatti. I loved it. I could see why there's so much talk about him definitely being nominated for Best Actor for the Academy Awards, and I would not be surprised if he won. But I still have to watch Maestro because I want to see what the all the hoopla is about Bradley Cooper. And I did see Oppenheimer, so I could see Cillian Murphy getting it too. But so far, based on from what I've seen, I have to give it to Paul Giamatti. I think he just did a fantastic job. He really carries that movie.
well, I will argue with that a little.
Okay.
I saw it, I loved it, but I think the three of them carry it.
Mm.
I mean, it's an ensemble in a way. I mean, and I think the acting is extraordinary. I mean, it's a sad movie. I mean, these are sad people,
Yeah.
but it's also hopeful. And the young guy who's in it, they found him. I mean, I googled it after watching it. They had gone to the school where they wanted to film it, and they had auditioned some of these kids, and that's how they found him. And now he's at Carnegie Mellon,
Oh,
which you must know about.
I am familiar with that school. Yes.
Right, and getting really his technique down, which is amazing because he really was such an instinctual performance.
It was
But
very.
I
It's a.
loved it.
Oh, good, good. And how
I
about you,
did.
Jennifer? Anything you've read or watched lately?
Well, actually, um I've been watching movies because before the all the awards, I'm always curious to see all of them, and there's a lot I've liked. But I just was it was on, I think, 60 Minutes. This, I don't know where I read it, heard about it, but there's a documentary called Beyond Utopia, which is about a South Korean, a Northern Korean family that is trying to escape to South Korea. And it's a fascinating film. I mean, it really tells you about life in North Korea and what it takes to, the incredible risks that are involved. It's the kind of thing that I really enjoy. I mean, some of the footage that's done by iPhone and these people in the tunnels and stuff, it's hard to get a sense of it, but most of it isn't done that way. A lot of it's people talking about what happened.
Right.
So I would recommend that to anybody who likes really to get a clear sense of the bizarre country that North Korea is.
Now, where can people see that? Is it on streaming or is it in the
I
theaters?
No, it's streaming. I think I got it on Amazon. You have to rent it.
Hmm.
But and it may be in theaters. I don't know, but I'm streaming it.
Okay, sounds great. Beyond Utopia it does sound fascinating. I'm gonna see
Well,
if
it's an
I'll.
interesting title, but it's I guess it has to do with, I guess, them finally getting to South Korea and
Mhm.
not being able to believe their their new life.
Exactly, exactly. Okay, so Jennifer, please tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, this is the Creative Writing Life podcast, so like, tell us about your background. How did you become a writer? Were you the kid who always was, writing stuff down, or did you come to it later in life, said, "Hey, I really enjoy doing this. I want to do it more."
Well, first of all, I have to say I feel like my glasses are really shining, and I apologize. I don't know how to stop that.
That's okay.
Anyhow, the answer is that I come from a family where writing is very natural to us. I mean, all of us. My parents both wrote in different forms. My mother wrote cookbooks, and garden books, but she also wrote both of my parents in the 1930s wanted to write the great American novel that would free them to live the creative bohemian life they wanted to live didn't succeed. And so my father was a patent attorney until the end of his days. But one of my sisters, she writes as well. I mean, it's just we were readers and writers, and it's something. And writing to me also clarifies my thinking. I like nothing else. I have dreadful handwriting, so I can't read what I write. But my computer is how I think and read, and think and understand. It's really important to me. So writing is just something I never thought I'd write a novel, but I do like to write.
Okay. So, okay, before we get to the novel part of your life, I want to kind of like work up to it. That I was reading through your bio, and I love the line that says, "A decade or so later, after we're I guess working in family therapy and divorce mediation, she committed career suicide by becoming a theater producer," which that is just a great line in itself. So, how did you make that transition into working in theater?
Well, it was so. I mean, I had a profession, and I did it just because I didn't know. It was a very spontaneous move that wasn't really the best move for me for a lot of reasons, but I'm not somebody who lives with regret. You make a decision, you move forward, you make it
Hmm.
work. And at the time, I have 5 kids, and my youngest at that time was going to be going to a private school in Manhattan. And so we were going to we don't live in Manhattan, we were going to be getting an apartment there. And an opportunity had come to me to be involved in a show, producing a show. And it's like I always had this fantasy about being in the entertainment business. I mean, I never got the stardust out of my eyes. I think, when I was growing up, I don't know, my parents had friends, a couple of friends who were movie stars, and I lived in a very suburban kind of neighborhood where people weren't movie stars. And I just always felt this, excitement about it. So when I had this opportunity, I figured that's it. I'm going to go in. I'm going to jump in. I'm going to make it work. And I don't think I can do both. I don't think I could really immerse myself and learn about it if I don't walk away from what I was doing.
Hmm. Okay. So,
So I
yeah.
did.
Okay. So here's a question that, I think about this a lot. So especially always seeing about shows that are in development. So as a producer, what is it you look for in a show that makes you think this is something I want to be involved with, or this is something I do not want to go anywhere near this?
Well, over the years, my view changed as I became more knowledgeable. And if Hugh Jackman's in a show, you're going to make money. It's not about it. I mean, there are very few stars who can sell tickets in theater. Theaters, what I learned over the years is that theater's a really crappy business. I mean, it's almost impossible to succeed.
Hmm.
A show can run for 5. I remember it was 42nd Street. I think it ran for 5 years on Broadway and never recouped on Broadway. I mean,
Wow.
it's insane. It's a very, very tough business. So as I became more knowledgeable, which I did, I had to learn on the job. I learned a show I feel like if the content, there's a couple of shows I've done just because I feel like they have so much value, even if they don't make it, I want to do it anyhow. One of those was Caroline or Change, which I just felt was like
Hmm.
one of the most incredible plays. So, and it didn't succeed, but I didn't regret it. But you learn to know about budget. What are the chances a show has a shot at recoupment? And actually, recoupment shouldn't be the goal that's getting to zero. It should be being successful. Not just creatively, but if you're a producer, you want to not only be financially successful, but if you're carrying other people with you, you're losing other people's money too. So I look at the budget, and I don't look at the figures that are given to me. I make my own assessment because people, they offer the ideal scenarios. And I also have to love the show, or this sounds awful and crass, but I have to think it's going to make money and will succeed, which is everyone's. And I've done that and made the wrong call on that too. It's just a tough business.
Okay.
But
No, I
but when
I totally see that.
but there, I may go, for example, I went to Chicago to see the original production of August Osage County. which was at Steppenwolf. And I just loved that show. That was a show I got involved with, and I would have, I think I would have done it no matter what. But when I saw audiences, when you have a chance to see a show that's already up and you see how audiences respond to it, that's also informative. I mean, there's so many things to look at when you're weighing whether to get involved in a show. At the moment, I'm not. I'm really just too involved in my own projects, so I don't know. I never say never, but at the moment, theater is not top of my list.
Okay, I totally get that. So, if after your
And
experience in theater, you eventually moved on to screenwriting, and along with teaching it at the Sarah Lawrence Writing Institute. So, what was the inspiration behind that? I mean, that is totally totally different worlds, going from theater to screenwriting.
well, it wasn't that I went from one to the other. I did both at the
Hmm.
same time. But and it's because, I mean, this is maybe more information than you want or your listeners want to hear. But after 9/11, it became much harder to finance a play
Hmm.
because there wasn't the same type of people planning a year in advance to come to New York. It was much more week of, day of type of thing. So the harder it became to finance a show, the more producers there were on top of a show. I don't know when you were in New York last, but if you look at the number of producers who are involved in most shows, there may be 30 people, there may be more. Some of its entities will have 2 or 3 people involved. I mean, so the more producers got involved, the less involvement they had in anything involving the running of the show or the marketing of the show. You'd be invited, if you were lucky, you'd be invited to an opening night. A day after opening party, and everybody would be sitting around and either depressed and wanting to kill themselves, or or putting out the champagne and kind of figuring out what's next. And I mean, they already had that. You were not a part of it. So as it became less in any way creative to me, I became more anxious to do things that were creative. So the first thing I did in terms of screenwriting is in the 90s, I wrote a screenplay with my son and we produced it. It's called Family Blues. It's still on Amazon. It's old. And then I kept writing things. And I mean, there's something I've just done this year, which I've been working on for like 9 years. It was based on a book I optioned. There's other books I optioned where I finally, my option wore out, and it was a story about war. And at the time, it was a really good script, I have to say, but it was at a time, I think the Iraq War, whatever, nobody wanted to, even when I can't think of his name. Uh, I'm sorry, an embarrassing senior moment, but even the most experienced directors couldn't get a movie done about war themes.
Mm.
So I've done a bunch of things. I've got a whole bunch of scripts that I've been working on, and the screenwriting teaching came to me through an opportunity that a friend of mine invited me onto. I'm no longer with Sarah Lawrence Writing
Ah,
Institute. During COVID, I they were able to have students from all over the world, which really gave them an opportunity to have a much broader reach. But for me, it meant much larger classes, and that's just not my style. I'm very workshop style, so I do it privately, and I think I'm like a script doctor.
oh, okay,
Um,
sure, sure. That is a
well, I help
very
people. Well, I help people find their story, and through teaching, you learn a lot too. I mean, you learn from your students as well.
mhm.
I love it. I actually really love it.
That's great. Oh, so writing screenplays, it's so different from any other form of writing. I mean, there's structure and there's characters and plot and story development. How were you able to help writers? I mean, a lot of writers who come into it, a lot of them have written books before, so they're so used to really going on and on with with the colorful prose or explaining what somebody's thinking or why they're doing it. How were you able to help writers make that adjustment from one form of writing to screenwriting?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. It was a challenge I had to face myself.
Mm,
But I think that most of the people who came to me were beginner screenwriters, and they really just they weren't necessarily people who've done things before. There
okay.
was one person who came to me who did have that issue where she had written stuff about it. And it you have to help people, no matter who, no matter, even if they haven't written a book, that the process of learning how to write, screen dialogue is very different from real life dialogue necessarily. Learning how everything has to be moving the story forward, how it has to be so tight, how nothing is gratuitous, how even your explanations have to be very well honed. I mean, I think anybody at any level has to do some learning on that part.
True, true. So one of the topics you've discussed is how writing fiction, you say it's a team sport. Now, I've always seen writing, it's primarily solitary activity, but ultimately the writer will need a community to take it beyond just having written it. So how do you say writing fiction is a team sport?
Well, sport may be a misnomer,
Okay.
but and I want to say that the comment that whatever you're writing is, to me, the most important for me is character development. You got to know those characters. I live with them a long time,
Hmm.
even while I'm writing and before I'm writing. They're just, that's to me really important. But oh, exactly. Can you repeat your question?
Oh, because you talk about how, okay, it was not necessarily a team sport, but more like
Oh,
team activity, like writing
yeah.
fiction.
Well, because part of this whole novel that I wrote was done to a large extent. It was I had taken a short story writing class just for fun to find out, can I write that way? Can
Hmm.
I write a 500-word story? And when people said, "Oh, a book is 60,000 words minimum," I figured, well, that's never going to happen. And I mean, I seriously didn't dream that I could write a novel. And but I loved writing the short stories, and I started creating characters in that format, which it's been many years, but there was characters I kind of liked. But with the screenwriting, with the Sarah Lawrence group, there were a bunch of teachers and friends that I have, where we created a writing group where every summer we do a retreat where we go away for like a week and we write. And if I had something I was working on, like a musical or something, I would have to devote my time to that. But I found the time to start thinking about, can I put these characters into a story? Is it possible? The answer is I started doing it, but it would have never, ever, ever happened without COVID, because that put me back home. And I had the time to be my office was closed. I wasn't commuting, so I was saving time that way. So I had the opportunity to really work at it. But the reason why I call it a village is that my writing group, I would send them drafts. We often during Zoom we would write on Zoom. During COVID, we would write on Zoom, and we wouldn't talk or anything. But if one of us had a question about something we're working on, we would talk about it. We would share our work. And it was like, it was invaluable to me. Invaluable, because all the people I worked with, or my writing group, they all have published books, and they all have different ways of writing. So they were able to offer me thoughts about how to go about this, or to comment on what wasn't working. I mean, for example, somebody once said, it reads too much like a screenplay. And I realized, all right, I got to tone down the dialogue, and I got to figure out how to interweave all the narrative stuff that has to be done, and bring people. I have to be the camera.
Okay.
That's how I think I have to be that camera. And damn, that was hard. It was not easy. It wasn't natural for me or easy, and I've gotten much more comfortable with it. But without my group, I couldn't have done it. And I also have to say that when I felt like it was as far as I could take it, I hired a developmental editor who gave me incredible notes. I mean, unbelievable. I thought I'd faint when I got it. It was like 2,000 notes. I'm not kidding. and but it was so spot on. And I only do things if I agree with it. People can give me thoughts, but I just feel like anybody who writes, who has something published, doesn't just sit alone in a room. You're going to have even if you're going to have a developmental editor, if you go through an agent or through a publisher, no matter what, you're going to have other people giving you input and helping you shape it. And listen, we've read stuff out loud. That makes a big difference. So I just don't think it's somebody alone sitting in a room.
No, that's very much the case. I mean, that's something I've talked about a lot, is that the writer works on it themselves, but then it's up to them to reach out to the people in their community to get help or guidance or even advice, or like, okay, I've got this done. What should I do now? And what's great about, this networking plays a great factor in that as well. That you're able to reach out to people in your community, say, hey, I could use some help, and someone might help you, and then you can return the favor, and someone comes back to you and says, hey, can you take a look at this and give me some notes? And it's a great
Well,
exchanging of work.
yeah, it's very reciprocal. And having been in theater, and doing and seeing a lot of readings, table readings and stuff, which is an incredible process for learning what you have. I did that with films too,
Hmm.
where I would bring together actors and really even read a chapter out loud, read it to other people. What you will hear, even what you will hear when you read it out loud. If I read something out loud, I all of a sudden think, oh my God, no, okay, cut, or add, whatever. But just hearing something is very valuable.
Oh yeah,
So,
I've heard that a lot from about table reads, from screenplays, that because you're the writer, so you have it in your head like how this character says this particular line, but then you give it to an actor and they read it and it's something totally different, and maybe it has a completely unexpected effect on the rest of the scene, or something pops. You're like, oh, I know, I can't believe I didn't realize that way before.
oh, well, listen, actors who are smart and who really understand the character, they can give you enormous feedback on their, oh, that doesn't sound right to me. That's false, or I would never say that. Or they make suggestions that I'm very open to suggestions and notes. I remember somebody who was a student asking me, oh my gosh, everybody's giving me help in this group. Does this mean it's mine? And and it's kind of a fear people may have, is if other people give you ideas and suggestions, does that take away from what you're doing? I don't think so. I think it only strengthens it. You don't
Hmm.
you don't listen to what everybody says. You go crazy, but it has to resonate. You have to feel like, oh, that'll. For Can I give you just for example?
Sure.
I don't want to just monopolize too much, but my developmental editor had made a suggestion to me on the book, and I don't know if any of your audience will read it, and I hope they will. Um, but there was the main character, Bet, through whom this story is. It's not told through her; it's told through 7 different points of view. Everybody who's invited to her dinner party that she wakes up one morning and decides to give, and it all happens within the course of 24 hours. Um, Everybody has a connection to her, and she has that it's all very interrelated. But she's a widow, and her husband had died a few years ago, but he's a very important link. And the development editor had suggested that I find a way of connecting all the different characters and in their points of view with that dead husband.
Hmm.
And it was such a smart suggestion. I had to then do it. It's not like she did it for me, but the point is that it was such a good way of adding kind of richness to it in terms of what he meant to everybody. And it was, so anyway, that's how people can be really helpful to you.
So when you were working on developing the story, so that aspect never occurred to you. You just thought, he's the husband's connected to like a couple of people, just not everybody.
Well, yes, I didn't have him misconnected. And I also initially had a prologue where he was like a ghost, and I had fun with that. But, he was dancing around with Ginger Rogers and, doing all these crazy things. There goes Einstein. Hey, hey, Al, this really crazy stuff. But it was, I mean, one of my somebody that actually, the woman who wrote the book that my movie's based on, the current one, she had said to me, she sent me articles on prologues. I mean, you got to really be clear on why you're doing a prologue. And not only that, other people had suggested to me in terms of creating, alternative worlds, so to speak, you've really got to know the rules of it. And, and, so while I had fun writing it, I just realized it was a mistake. So he was going to be kind of floating around to weaving in and out, but instead I thought this is a much better way to link him. And he wasn't linked with everybody before. I
Hmm.
definitely had to find the links. And that was great. It really enriched it.
Oh, it definitely sounds like you experienced what writers lovingly call killing your darlings. That it's
Yes.
happened to all of us.
Well, if you can't do that, you can't, it's no point in getting feedback. You can't fall in love with your words or
Yeah,
your
yeah.
characters. I got rid of 2 characters. I mean, I'm very good at getting rid of what doesn't well, I don't know that they didn't work, but I was concerned about appropriation, which is such a big
Hmm.
thing these days. You have to be so careful.
Hmm.
Although I don't, no matter how you write, unless you write about one person only, you're going to be writing from other perspectives. I mean, if you're writing and there's a man in your story or a woman in your story or whatever, you're not that person. I'm not the person. I'm not any of the characters in the book anyway, but they're all bits and pieces of me and everything I know and I've experienced.
Well, that's a common thing as well, that every character and every story you create, there's some aspect of them that is a reflection on you.
Yeah, and I have a couple of things that happened that actually when I read some of the reviews and stuff, I have to rethink. If I read the book today, I probably wouldn't even know what was going to happen at the end. I kind of forget what I've written. But there are a couple of things that happened actually in my life that I've put in there, but they're not autobiographical in the sense that I've just used something. Like, for example, my father had a terrible fall, and that experience of going with him to the emergency room and stuff, I worked into this with another character. But well, that's how all writing is, right? It comes out of your own experience.
Hmm. Yeah. So, okay. So let's talk about your book, Alphabet, that you've referenced a couple of times. So, what if you can give us kind of like the thumbnail description of the story, and what was the inspiration for it?
Well, the that's the second question is harder to ask. The thumbnail would be, it's basically a book about a an old woman, 95, an old widow who wakes up one morning and makes a decision to give a dinner party that night for all the people who are, I call her nearest and dearest, and a medium. And nobody knows what that party is about. So during the course of the day, you meet the 7 or 8 people who are part of her, who are going to be at that dinner party. You get to know who they are, what their connections are, what their issues are, where they, what, who they, how they matter to the old lady. And throughout it, there's this question as to why, what is the function of this party? She hasn't given a party in over 5 years, and when her husband was alive, and even then she didn't. So it's almost, there's kind of that undercurrent as to what are we heading for? Are we heading for a seance with a medium coming? What on earth is about to happen? Um, so that's basically the story. She has her daughter, her great granddaughter, her housekeeper, her night aide, and 2 of the neighbors are basically the main characters whose stories you get to know. They're all quite different and they all have different issues, but they all have ways of being connected with each other and with the old lady. My inspiration. Well, I don't know that I had an inspiration per se. It was an evolution. It kind of evolved. It was from that, taking that little writing course and liking to do it. And then the opportunity came up with COVID, where I had the time, because it was a very big job. It was very hard to figure out who the characters should be, how to integrate them all. And it was like a jigsaw puzzle. It
Mhm.
was quite hard. But I love that. I mean, I love a challenge like that. So I was totally committed to it. And, but there was no, I mean, I don't know. I find different, I always need projects. Um, I mean, I guess I hope to die that way. And during COVID, theater shut down, so my business shut down. I've been working on a musical with my lyricist and the director, and there was nothing much we could do with that. And it just kind of opened up that window for me, and it became my total focus. Oh,
So I
wait a
did.
minute.
Oh,
There
yes.
wasn't my total focus. Excuse me.
Oh,
I
okay.
forgot. I'm sorry, but there was a little short musical that we filmed during COVID. called Cockroaches and Cologne. It's on YouTube and a bunch of places. And
Okay.
it's been in all sorts of festivals. I mean, it's really funny. We didn't make it wasn't monetized, unfortunately, but we did it totally. It was all during COVID. So it was really interesting. The whole thing was done virtually.
Hmm.
So that was something else I did during COVID.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I did want to ask because mentioned this before that so you had the story and your developmental editor suggested what if you had this connecting link with the dead husband? So once you were able to start incorporating that, how long did it take you to, I guess, make the appropriate changes to the rest of the story?
I really can't, well, not that long. I work very quickly when I know what I have to do.
Okay.
In fact, even with, any kind of writing, I mean, once I'm clear, I move. Um, so I can't give you a time thing, but I mean, her notes when they came to me, really, it took me about a couple of weeks to go back to read them. I mean, it felt
Hmm.
very overwhelming, but I was committed to doing it. So when I read it and I started, kind of narrowing it down, I mean, some of them were things like you use the word beautiful, in two different sentences in the same paragraph. I love those fixes,
Hmm.
and so there weren't a lot. So, I mean, but it was really the big fixes. And once I was able to kind of get it to a manageable size, then I could work on it quite quickly. But
Okay.
I had to just kind of, I had to make it manageable for myself.
Okay, okay, I may have misspoke. I didn't mean like a specific time frame of how long it took. I guess it was more of like how much of a challenge was it to make all those changes? Where some of them, oh, this one's really easy, or this one's going to take a little manipulating of some storylines here.
Well, she was helpful to me too in thinking, well, maybe with that character, he could maybe be part of that. I mean, she had given me some guidelines into that. But
Hmm.
once I got hold of the idea, it just wasn't that difficult for me to do. I just loved the idea. So I just looked for ways in which to kind of incorporate it into all the different scenes. But with multiple characters, it's very challenging, because you have to constantly be connecting them together. I mean, I love that type of reading. I mean, Barbara Kingsolver has done some wonderful books that way.
Hmm.
Um, as I said, Amor Tolls. I don't know if you ever read A Gentleman in Moscow.
I do not believe so.
It's a phenomenal book. I mean, and how the process of integrating characters it's it's challenging, but it's also fun. I mean, it makes you work harder.
Okay.
Um,
Well, okay. So one of the things we've talked about on the show a lot in the past is that when it comes to outlining, before you actually get to the writing, you're putting the story together, you're organizing it, you're trying to figure out what happens when, who it happens to, and all that fun stuff. So, are you the type of writer that you are very meticulous with your outlining? You have to know how things play out, and of course, you know how it's going to end. Or are you the type who just sits down and says, "I'm going to let the characters take me wherever they need to go"?
well, a little bit of both. I
Okay.
almost feel like showing, because with the one I'm working on now, with the one I'm working on now, well, the alphabet, what I had to do, that was hard. I don't know that I outlined it. As somebody I know who's a writing teacher, she'd given me this unbelievable graph of integrating people and how many pages this person is, how many words. I mean, I have a lot of trouble. I am much more instinctual. But with the current thing I'm working on, I have a clear idea of all the things I want to happen. But then I'm just kind of, it's like a list. I don't outline and all of that. It's a list and I'll refer back to it, or maybe I won't. It's kind of in my head and it's also subject to change. So I kind of let my characters help me know where to go. Maybe that sounds weird, but it's how I write. If I'm very clear on my characters and they're in my head all the time. I mean, when I'm going to bed at night, if I'm driving in my car, I'm honestly thinking about these people a lot. They live within me. And I mean, authenticity matters so much to me. And when I've gotten some reviews which have said the characters seem very real, and I mean that's the ultimate compliment to me.
That's great.
So
Have you? Oh, please go ahead.
No, but if you know your characters, you kind of know how they're going to handle things.
Oh, yeah, that's true because it does help to really know like what kind of person they are before you even start working with them. Now that being said, have you ever been working on, say, a subplot or a storyline, and all of a sudden you kind of decide this character wouldn't do that; they would do the complete opposite.
Totally. I mean, as I say, it has to. It's a process. I don't know how else to say it. I don't know that I would actually have something if I felt like I know people when I'm writing down. I not my outline, but my list. I'm a list person. I have maybe 25 things I want to have happen in this book. It's things. Some of them are going to go away. They are. It isn't that they're necessarily wrong for it, but maybe it just. I don't know. I mean, I have to figure it out as I go along. It's not a very scientific method, but I am not that person who does, big outlines, and I work more from the gut.
That there's nothing wrong with that as well. So you talked about it for yourself and also for the character of Bet, that about family. Now you say that family plays a role in your life and in your work. You've got 5 kids, you have 15 grandchildren, at least the bio I read, that's what it said. So that sounds like not only does it provide for a lot of material, but it also apparently has a huge influence on your work. So can you address that a little bit?
Well, it's kind of my starting point. I mean, it's like I I mean, I think if I think about anything I've written, it's basically revolved in some way around family. Families are hard, they're complex. There's always problems. It's not easy. I mean, my definitely, it's not like I use my family as material so much as just my understanding of behavior and characters, and also having been a family therapist and having training. It's something that I think just informs. I don't know if I had never had that training, if I would have still have kind of the understanding of behavior. I don't think you have to be trained to necessarily have a deep understanding of human behavior for whatever reason. I think I have it. And what makes people tick. I'm not always right, but um, I I I feel like in order to be the kind of writer where I would want to read the work, it's important for the writer to have a very good understanding of people. If it's inauthentic, if I read something, I'm not going to name best-selling authors, but if I read something that feels, it's like seeing a movie that's really crappy with big stars in it and a terribly written script, because it doesn't really matter. It's just about their charming stars. I mean, I want to. I often, if I wanted to feel like everything that people do is something that they would do and could do. So I maybe I don't mean to toot my own horn, but I think I'm pretty good at that. Um, um, and I'm always learning. I mean, if people will give me feedback on something I've written, and I'll think, God, why didn't I notice that? How did I miss that? I mean, it happens a lot. It's like it's layer. It's the old onion skin, right? It's layer.
Mhm.
You go through. You do miss things. I'm not saying I always get it right. I don't.
Mhm. Well, that's why there's multiple drafts.
Yeah. So you keep finding things and exploring things, and it's really pretty. I mean, I really like it. I'm having fun with this.
Oh, that's the important part, is that you're enjoying doing it, because if you didn't enjoy it, then it would just feel like work and then it's not fun.
No, I wake up and it's all I want to do, which is bad because there are things. Uh, uh, um, I have to be a human being within my family as well.
Yeah,
But
you're
listen,
you're not alone in that.
well, if anybody needs me, I'm there. I think all my kids know that.
Okay, that's great. We'll get to the plugs in just a second. So as we wrap things up, so as an experienced writer and a former writing instructor and a current private instructor, so what would be like a key piece of advice you would give to any writer, either the ones starting out or the ones with a little more time under their belt?
Well, I think that whole thing where I said, it takes a village. I think, right, joining a writing group, having peers whose work you respect, and who's who can give you feedback that you will that'll be valuable to you. I just think to work in isolation is a mistake. Uh, I mean, more than, and it's also nice. I mean, listen, I can have Zoom meetings with my writer friends and nobody will talk for hours. I mean, but it's there. It's having resources. It's having people who are there. And so it's sharing your work, getting feedback, and not being too precious about your own words.
No, yeah, we've discussed that one a lot on this show as well. That
Yeah.
you can't you can't keep it sacred. That you have to, again, you have to be willing to kill your darlings and do what's right for the story, not what's right for the writer.
Wait, you can think something you've written is brilliant, but it's gratuitous to what the story is. So
Mhm.
so it's you have to recognize that and know
Mhm.
that even though you may think it's a funny scene or whatever it is you think it is, if it doesn't belong in the story, don't humor yourself.
No, oh, yeah, trust me, I have gone through that so many times myself with my own scripts. Just I would have scenes that I thought were fantastic and I loved it, and I would get feedback and people would say, this is good, but why is it in here? And then I would have to put my ego aside and think, okay, why are they saying it? I'm not going to just discard what they said just because I don't agree with it. I would say they said it for a reason. And then I would, have to put on my editor hat and say, okay, does this work in this context? Does it need this scene? Does the scene work? And as much as I would love a scene, it would rip my heart out to take the scene out. But in the end, although I hated to take the scene out or the sequence out, the script was better for it.
Well, I'm just going to say quickly because I know you're running out of time.
No, we're
But
fine. We're fine.
there's a movie that I sometimes recommend to people in terms of a movie that doesn't have, I don't think it has a gratuitous moment in it. And that's a film called The Confirmation.
Hmm.
And it's with Clive Owen. And there's so many ways you can use that as a teaching tool, because the film opens up with you opens up before you've even seen the lead character. You almost know that his condition, that he's in trouble, because you hear an old truck trying to start and it doesn't start, and that's before you see him. So that the way in which it establishes character without a word of dialogue, without even seeing it, and then you see him and he hasn't shaved and he's in this beat up old truck and it won't start and it won't start. Do you know how quickly this guy, at the end of the movie, he's got to be in a better place?
Well, as we like to see that character arc in play.
Yes, I mean it's an interesting movie, and he's a kind of been a crappy dad. He's divorced, and it's a kind of a father-son movie. But almost the next thing that happens is he meets up with his ex-wife, who's about to go away for the weekend, and her son's gonna take the kid, and she basically says to him, "You screw up this weekend, you're not gonna see this kid again." Their whole marital history. So when I talk, finding ways to create backstory that doesn't feel expositional. Every move in that, I mean, it feels so formulaic, but if you see this movie, it doesn't feel that way. But there's no extra gravy in that whole movie. And you can fault the movie because it never deals with the dad's alcoholism, for example. But in terms of movie making and just the economy of a script, it's a very good movie to watch.
Okay, The Confirmation with Clive Owen. Okay,
And
sounds great.
the kid in it's amazing. He's just amazing.
That's great. Okay, well, Jennifer, this has been fantastic and very informative, and just a absolute joy to talk to you about
Thank
all
you.
these amazing things that you've done. So, where can people find out more about you, and how can they order your book, Alphabet?
Thank you. Well, they can order it from any online streaming site for books. It's in paperback, Kindle, and Audible. But I have a website that'll also take you to the book. It'll give you some reviews. It'll show you some podcasts, other things I'm doing. It's my name, Jennifer Manocherian, all lowercase, no dots, no nothing. JenniferManocherian.net. And it's kind of everything I'm doing is on that website.
That's great.
Um,
Are you on any social media platforms as well,
yeah,
or just go to the website?
I am, but there's a link to all of them on my
Ah,
website. But I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and I have somebody helping with social media since it's about the last thing, the way in which I want to be spending my days.
you're not alone in that thought. Believe you me. All right. Well, Jennifer, thank
I'm
you.
going to be writing. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. And again, it's Jennifer at Manocherian and Jennifer Manocherian
Net.
dot net. Okay. I didn't want to say the wrong one and
Thank
send people
you.
to the wrong site. All right, Jennifer, thank you so much. This has been
Thank
fantastic.
you.
This is the part of the show where Justin usually says, thanks for listening. If you liked it, leave a comment, a thumbs up. We appreciate any positive review. Negative reviews, we don't want those at all. So you can check out Justin. His material is online for Amazon, and you can also check out my stuff, my screenwriting blog, maximumz.blog. I'm also on Twitter at maximum_z. I'm also on Instagram at Pez Screenwriting, PEZ. Screenwriting, yes, those are my initials. Like I said, Justin's not here, so I'll say bye for him. Thanks to Jennifer. This is Paul.
Can
Thanks
I?
for listening. Yes, please go ahead.
Oh, I want to give you a comment because you asked for comments. You're a
Sure.
wonderful host because
Oh,
you listen. You
oh,
listen.
well, I thank you. Because we want to, because this show is all about helping writers, and I want to ask people, I want to ask our guests the questions that if I were a listener, what are the kinds of things that I would want to know? And I think what's the best part about the show is that every writer we talk to, every creative, they all have their own story. How, how they started, how they got to where they are now, what are they working on, and what advice did they give for writers, and everything in between those questions, to me, is just fascinating stuff because there's always something to learn from somebody. And
Mhm.
so when we could get the chance to talk to someone with the experiences that you've had, it just makes it that much better.
Well, thank you. It's
My
been a
pleasure.
pleasure.
Oh, wonderful. As we're starting to say, this has been the Creating Writing Life podcast. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and most importantly, go write something.